not taking them seriously, settling with one and not reapproaching it later, not updating it later. This is so important. It's definitely the biggest mistake people make.
Some people think that the title is the most important part. No. Some people think the content is the most important part. No. The thumbnail is the most important part. People have to see the thumbnail first, then they read the title and decide if they even want to click it. So your content will never see the light of day. Your title will never get read unless you catch them with the thumbnail. So don't be lazy on this part. This is extremely important. Get good at thumbnails, split test them often, and put resources and time towards them. So in order to do this, I want to give you a tangible workflow that you can do.
Mistakes that we made early on, YouTube, right? Because I could think of two that I made right out of the gate, which was thinking that, everything needs to be about the production, right? So very little in terms of research for titles and thumbnails, right? So I just went into it thinking like, I'll just make a really great video, I'll put it out there, and I'll get millions of views, right? I mean, I'm talking about like early on YouTube. But even with the channels that we currently have, do you find that just looking back, if we could have done things differently, the mistakes that we made to help people go a little bit further along that path, what would they be? And how would you change what we had made?
Well, I would say the biggest mistake you can make is getting comfortable with your titles and thumbs and never updating them, because the trends change a lot, and thumbnail styles and title styles become dated.
Yep.
And just like other things that become dated, they get brushed aside for the newer, flashier, more effective, however you want to call it.
And you're a pioneer, right? You cut that path if it's a new channel, right? So for somebody else to say, ooh, I like this thumbnail.
And I think that YouTube offers split testing now is like, what a massive game changer. Because now you can go with some proven methods, and also, you can do 3 thumbnails, up to 3 thumbnails. So you could do one is like a proven method from another creator. One is like an AI version or whatever you think it should be. And then one is kind of this wild thought.
Yeah, abstract of some sort.
Yeah, and by the time you do 100 videos, some of those wild thoughts are going to materialize as a good idea. So like, just never getting comfortable in the thumbnail game and the title game. I think that was a really big mistake we made, because our ideas were really good and they caught and they were timely, and we got away with some pretty good thumbnails and titles. But then when competition caught up with us and we're doing titles and thumbnails better than us, they started to beat us to death, basically, like our channel into the ground.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that now you look at even your competitors and say, well, what are they doing that's better? And try and identify some of those too. So even looking at your competition who's, beating you at the same level or close, it's just keeping an eye on them and seeing what they're doing. Because when you're at the top or when you're doing well, you don't want to change anything.
Right.
Because you might screw it all up.
Right.
So you really want to be careful and watch for your channel to plateau. And once it starts to, I think titles and thumbs are a good way, especially if it's evergreen content, that you can just keep your stuff fresh.
I think so what I'm taking from that is, the first thing is that to keep you relevant and in the space, keep yourself on the toe, like keep yourself on your toes at all times, like understanding that you need to evolve, right? Over time, you can't be complacent, like, oh, this is working now, but always still try and look for how do I improve this, right? That philosophy of Kaizen that we talk about, just constantly looking for improvement. Because competition is at your heels, and more importantly, you want to be making better productions and overall a better product. I'll call it a packaging. That's what it is. It's a packaging, right? It's the number one thing that you look at to get people onto your community. And if you want to do it right, you want to constantly be pushing the envelope.
I think that a lot of times content makes itself. You know?
Yep.
And that's not true with the thumbnails and titles. You have to be you would think like, oh, we'll just put this title up, and that can work. Or the title says itself, it's this and this. But like the titles and the thumbnails are where you actually have to like do some stuff. Like you don't have to do as much editing as you think. you know, in a lot of content. It's the same thing almost. Like, yeah, some like, you know, these Logan Paul vlogs or something is all the edit, really.
Right.
It's really just all the edit.
Also, an extra tip is if there's something in your video or something is said in your video that's really, really compelling, don't be afraid to use that in your thumbnail or in your title. We do it all the time. It's extremely powerful.
And the second part that you brought up that I think is, how do I verify that my videos are doing good? And your point to that is you look at the data, right? Like look into the data and understand, you know, these value points to verify that your video is doing good, your thumbnail is doing good, your titles are doing good, you know?
I think so, yeah. And it's tough when you're a young channel because if you don't have that data, how do you know? So that's why I think that the best way to do it is if you're doing stuff that already works and you have a different video but it's similar, that's going to give you the data points you're looking for. I just think that split testing right now is just the biggest opportunity ever because like you're getting all 3 data points. You're like, here's my crazy creation.
Right.
Here's what AI thinks, like with some of these tools like Spotter, some of these tools like vidIQ's new AI things, and then what a competitor has done, or even 2 that competitors have done. And then the best part is you pioneer a new trending thing because by the time you're done with 30, 40 videos, one of your thumbnails of the crazy things is going to be pretty good. And you can be like, all right, cool, I'm going to use that again over here. And imagine it works there too. That's really cool. You couldn't have that opportunity before. You had to either, it was all or nothing.
Right.
You're going to gamble on this thumbnail and it's either going to, do you really want to gamble when the video's good? You can just do something that's proven, make some money. Or do you want to gamble that, and how do you even know? Because if it didn't get served to the right people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Split testing ends that.
It does. Before, the only way to do that before was actually pay for ads.
Right.
So like that's a really great feature that I think YouTube came along with, you know, to offer to everybody. And I hope that it is available to every channel.
But I would say that like you do want a sample size, like at least a few thousand views before you start, you know, guessing on the data. Because if you have like 200 views and you start saying, well, obviously if it's completely lopsided, then that's one thing. But if you have 200 views and it's 55-45, 60-40, like meaning 60% of the clicks come from this one, still pretty early. Yeah. Now, if you have 1 million views and it's 60-40, it's pretty clear this one outperforms this one. You can comfortably move into there and expect a 10% better whatever. But having like a few thousand views before you make any rash decisions. But yeah, I don't know. That's the biggest mistake a creator can make, is paying not enough attention to their thumbnails and titles. For the simple fact is they already know what they want their content to be. Everyone already knows what they want their content to be.
Right.
They don't think about the titles and thumbnails nearly as hard as they need to.
Right.
Your biggest mistake is not taking them seriously and then settling with one and not reapproaching it later, not updating it later. This is so important. It's definitely the biggest mistake people make.
And we still make today, right? I mean, that's something
we make it all the time. It's like it's a time flow thing, because especially when you have multiple channels like we do, it's like, okay, yeah, that channel needs an update, it needs a rebrand, or this channel needs to get these videos need to get re-released for this XYZ reason. So it's a thing you have to do.
Yeah. And
the more channels you have, you got to fit it in. But yeah, we have that challenge all the time, and we always will. But as long as you're trying to do your best to handle that challenge, then, that's good enough. But yeah, sure. That's the biggest mistake people make, is they phone in the title and thumb and hope for the best. And they really focus hard on the content. And it turns out before someone gets to the content, they got to select your video. And that's really where it comes in. It's like, you got to hook them right there. Not even a hook on the video will save it. You got to hook them when they're looking at it. And that's a whole different world. And I don't know the answer to it, except you got to keep trying and not accept failure. Like, if you know your content's good, then it should get views. And it's on you if it's not. The title and thumbnails need to be better.
I think that's a solid point. Everyone that is at least attempting to start a channel, or you already have a channel, it goes the same way, right? Which is titles and thumbs are the most important.
And that's where a community is essential, because you can now not only split test your own, but take it to the community and say, guys, what do you think? Someone could say, you know what? I saw this thumb the other day when I was looking at this one niche. I love it, and it's really performing well over here. Why don't you try it over there in yours? Thanks.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. And now all of a sudden your video takes off, your whole channel takes off, your whole life is different. Literally just because you tried one thing. And like, that is why community is so important. And I always go back to poker with it, but it was like when someone that was winning was like, I've been doing this lately, it's really been working. You start adding it to your arsenal, it helps you, and your entire game all of a sudden is different and better. Even with golf, like one thing with one club, all of a sudden you're doing it with this other club, and now it's these aha moments, these big triggers.
Yeah.
Community, talking to people, like it's everything.
Yeah, it is. I think also within your own community when you're creating this, because you have 3 checkpoints, right? So you have this data points to kind of verify that you have a good click-through rate, data points to see if they're listening to your hook and staying attention, like what we call that, retention, right? So we have retention. But what you really want to know, the third validation point, and this is where the community gets involved, is that your own community, you can start asking, they can give you actual honest feedback about the content. And I think that's where you really start to have, okay, now I should create a product around this. Now I can create a business out of this, or I can, break off and do, we talked about Patreon before, or a membership or a course. Anyway, I think it's really valuable to get perspective from all 3 of those, not just one. But the point of community that you're bringing up, to not stay stale, to add things to your arsenal, the similar way that we use these new tools that are coming out, AI, video IQ, and all those other things.
Yeah, and I think that not only not staying stale, but just getting that initial aha up, like, is so huge. Like, people are always looking for, that like one little trick that like gets them from here to viral.
Yeah. And
guess what the trick is? It's like a good thumbnail, a good title, and a good video all at once, and a little luck. And you got to run that like 30 times before you even have a legitimate chance to go viral or something. And you got to keep going even though you're not going viral. And you got to keep redoing the thumbs and all that stuff. So that community is so important, because how could you possibly have that moment if it's just you? No one is that intelligent. You have to bounce ideas off of each other. You have to watch. Sometimes, I saw this one channel over here and they did this. I really like this. Let's try this over here. Or someone from the community. That happens so often, of like luck. Just, and I'm just in the YouTube space all the time. That's another thing I would tell people. Like, if you're watching cable TV and you're trying to be a YouTuber, you're doing it wrong. You need to be watching YouTube.
Right.
Because these things are just natural. The things you click on and the things you want to emulate become natural. If you are going to make money on YouTube, you need to be absorbed by it on the consumer end. Like, in this world of trying to understand the algorithm, like, you better be in that world, like.
Yeah, we're all consumers, so it's just a matter of, understanding, like, what do you like, right? Like I think we overcomplicate it, and we put this distance between us and other people, but in reality, we're all alike. So I think what your point is of saying, hey, you're a consumer just like your community is this a good thumbnail? Is this a good,
Well, it's just like, if you're like, well, I don't know what a good thumbnail is. I'm like, okay, well, have you seen any recently? And you're like, I don't know. Okay, well, are you going on YouTube to absorb content?
Right.
No, I do this one. It's like, well, then why are you in YouTube?
Right.
Because then get it the out. Because it's too competitive for you.
How could you possibly
know? And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is like, I'm only YouTube, only have been YouTube for so long at this point.
Right.
And even with our cable, we have YouTube TV, right? Mm-hmm. So like, if I creep over to that side, it's through YouTube. Yeah. So it's just like, I would say that to creators too, is like, if you're not completely immersed in YouTube content on the consumer end as well, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get it. Because because it's different. It's just different. And the differences are sometimes real small, but they're very clear when you're in that world. So I would say, like, definitely just get all into YouTube, even on the consumer side too. And that, all of a sudden, thumbnails will stick out, titles will stick out. They won't all look the same anymore. Yeah. You'll start to really see the subtleties pop.
Shape it, replacing the truth. I really can't hate it, but the lies are so creative. I don't mean to celebrate it, but it's cool. But look, the more that I deny you, as the fuel to the fire, your delusions I desire, but it's cool.